with this year's NBA playoffs looking like it might be one of the best we've seen in a long time, and with only about 10 games or so, depending on which team remaining in the season, I think it's about time that we talk about who the actual contenders are, who the pretenders are, and who the teams are that are just going to be in the playoffs because there's that many spots available. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to go through both conferences individually, and then I'll kind of do a little rundown of what I think will likely be the end teams from each division, like the top two of each division. So if you didn't know, you have 10 teams from each conference, with 4 of the teams being in the play-in, so you end up with 8 in the actual seeding chart, but you have 2 more for the play-in. This is all newer stuff. But so we're going to do, there's a full 10 teams. I did 6 on each side, 4 primary contenders, and then 2 like dark horse / just like less likely, but I think that could make a run. So if you're new to this channel, my name is John. This is the Sports Advocate. I hope you stick through this video. I talk about everything from NBA, NHL, NFL, pretty much just all things sports, whatever comes to my mind at the time. Go ahead and leave a like, comment down below who you think the most likely team to win the finals this year is going to be, and go ahead and subscribe. Let's go ahead and get straight into this, get to the point. We're going to start on the West, just because I think the top seeds, there's a little less parity, I think, in the West. The top seeds are a little easier to say who's an actual contender and all that stuff, whereas the East, I mean, I think even the 6th seed right now has a chance of ending up in the 1st seed if games play out the right way, whereas the West already has the top seed finished, and there's another team that already has a lock in the playoffs. So let's go ahead and get into it real quick. The first one, which is probably the easiest one, is the Suns. They're currently number 1 in the West. They've already locked in the top seed in the West. They're 11-4 without Chris Paul, which has been a big thing. Chris Paul got injured with a thumb dislocation, I think it was, right around the All-Star break. But they're 11-4 without Chris Paul. The past 2 weeks, Chris Paul has been doing shooting drills. So it's likely that Chris Paul may return here in the next week or so, either at the very start of the playoffs or just a couple games in, which is going to be good for the Suns. Devin Booker has been playing out of his mind, even with him out, and Aiden's been doing pretty well. The team altogether is doing very well, and their defense with Bridges and all that, the team's really flowing right now, even without Chris Paul, and Chris Paul's only going to add that much more with his ability to go get steals, with his passing ability, with all that stuff. They're also 36-9 versus teams in the Western Conference. That is the best by far of any team in any conference. Win-loss going against their own conference. Huge gap. And if you're thinking about it, if you got to lose 4 games in one singular series in the playoffs, and like you'd be out, best of 7, the Suns have only lost 9, so they would lose, like currently, I mean, and these 9 weren't to the same teams over and over. So, like, the chances of them actually getting knocked out, at least super early, is not as likely. When you get deeper in the playoffs, you get worn down and all that. It might be a different story. But I'd say the Suns are a definite contender, especially the revenge tour just lost last year to the Bucks after having a pretty dominant first start to that series. Next up, I got the Warriors. They were very, very good at the beginning of the year. A lot of injuries held them down. Clay returned. They played 1 game. Then Curry got injured. So it's tough to say how good they're going to be. They've slowly fell down the standings after Curry's injury, but he should be returning here soon. I think it was like 3 to 6 weeks or something. So he should be returning here in the next week or so, about the same timeline as Chris Paul. So once Curry returns, you got Clay, Steph, and Draymond Green all playing together, and I think they played like 2 games, 1 game total this year, let alone since like whatever 2018, 2019. So they've always been a great trio, and they're going to continue to be once everyone does get healthy. Their defense on the Warriors has been immense with Gary Payton and Jordan Poole. Steph's been doing pretty good on defense. Obviously, Draymond Green is great. Clay's one of the best two-way guards in the entire league. So the defense overall is just extremely good. The only downfall I would say for the Warriors, if everyone were to be healthy, is there's minimal experience for the Warriors outside of their big three. So you got Clay, Steph, and Draymond. They all have a lot of experience, but Jordan Poole really doesn't. Gary Payton doesn't. A lot of their other role players / bench players don't. I think they have Iguodala, the man when lasers are being pointed at the earth, that's who's shooting. But I mean, he's not even getting a whole bunch of minutes, so he's not a big part of that. So the Warriors definitely a contender. Next we got the Grizzlies. I'm a big Ja Morant fan. That's who I personally wanted the Bulls to get. Obviously, that wasn't going to happen with how low the Bulls pick was. They got Kobe White instead. But a huge Ja Morant fan. He's been playing very well. I'd say probably MVP caliber if it wasn't for how great the rest of the MVP candidates are this year. They're 8-2 in their last 10 games. They got a 52-23 record. They're second in the West. They have already locked in their spot for the playoffs. And I think it's just those two, the Suns and the Grizzlies, have locked spots in the West. They have a very young core with Ja Morant and all their backups. Steven Adams, big Steven Adams fan. I don't think anyone dislikes him. But I think he does bring a lot. I know a lot of people were like, "Oh, that's not a good trade for Valanciunas for him," but I think he adds more to the team of what they would actually need. Just like a dominant force in the paint, someone that sets those big body screens. I mean, he just bulldozes people, and I think he does a great job at doing what he did for Russ, again with Ja this year. I definitely think the Grizzlies, maybe not as high in the contenders list. I have them top 4, obviously, but I think they're still getting slept on, and maybe that's because they're a smaller market and all that stuff, but I think they really have a chance to go out and compete. Maybe they do something like my next team here, maybe they do something like the Jazz. Donovan Mitchell, he played out of his mind his first couple years. Maybe Ja Morant goes and does that and makes an attempt, and maybe they go get the Western Conference Finals or something like that just because Ja plays out of his mind. Like I said, next up I have the Jazz. It feels like every year the Jazz are always like, oh, this team's doing so good, but in the playoffs it doesn't matter. And you hope to see that maybe it's a different story, and I think it could be because they're not like they're always like the number 1, number 2 in the entire conference, and they're just working so hard in the regular season that they get worn out in the playoffs. So maybe that changes now. They don't have as many wins as they normally do the past couple years, but I think that can be a good thing. They're number 1 offense efficiency in the whole league, which honestly kind of surprising. They're 25th in the league in assists, so they're not great at moving the ball. They just find a way to score. They find a way to get it in, and they just do a very good job at it, whether that's Gobert, even though he doesn't score much, or Donovan Mitchell, or whoever it is. They find a way to score when they have to score, and that's very good news. You just hope to see them get some assists up. Like I said, they're top 10 in defense, and that's a big contribution to Rudy Gobert, 3-time Defensive Player of the Year. He's always out there blocking shots, doing a bunch of stuff, and he's a major contributor to that defense. Another thing I brought up just right before with the Ja Morant, comparing him to Mitchell. Mitchell's averaging 32 points a game in when he's played in the playoffs. So, that's actually kind of insane, especially for a younger guy. I know he hasn't played a lot of games, so when he plays more games, it's going to lower, obviously. But that's really, really good statistics. That's a leader going out and doing what he has to do for his team day in and day out in the playoffs. And that's something you love to see. I remember watching back in the bubble. Jamal Murray was going crazy, and Mitchell was going crazy, and it was just that was a great series. That was one of my favorite series, and I think there can be a lot of great series like that this year, especially both the East and West, just because there's a lot of West teams that are lower that could make a run just because they have a lot of injuries. There's a lot of East teams that can make a run just because how tight the East is, okay? So next up, we're going to move to the East. We're going to do my 4 teams in the East, and then we'll move to my honorable mentions. I got 2 in each conference for honorable mentions. I do want to bring them up because they're kind of dark horses, and I do like them, but they're definitely not top-tier contenders. So for the East, first things first, they're just got moved down to the second in the conference after their loss to the Nets, but I have the Heat, and gosh, I think the Heat can get something going with if Jimmy plays the way Jimmy played in the bubble. If Jimmy puts it all out, I mean, leaning against the score table and all that, like, Jimmy can lead this team. He's one of the best leaders in the league, even with all of the trash talk that happened with him on the Sixers and the Timberwolves and all that nonsense. But he's a great leader. You got Tyler Hero, who I would argue might be the 6th man of the year. He plays off the bench pretty often. You might say he's a starter or a fringe starter, so it's kind of hard. But I definitely say he's the leading 6th man of the year. Another thing with Jimmy, with Lowry, the steals, they always find a way to get steals. Jimmy, again, I guess he's kind of a forward more than a guard nowadays, but one of the best two-ways, kind of like kind of like Klay Thompson. Great two-way player. That's going to be a big help. Him and Kyle Lowry are going to get steals. Defense is going to be very good, and it's going to be hard to score on them no matter who you're matching up against. They're currently on a 4-game skid, and you got to wonder, maybe they're resting people. Obviously, they got some injuries right now. But since they already clinched the playoffs, maybe there's a little bit of, hey, if we lose, we get easier competition. And you never want to see that. You never want to say that that's what's actually happening. But there might be a little bit of it. I know the 1 seed's likely going to have to face the Nets. Maybe they're saying, oh, with Kyrie being able to play more, we don't want to face them as early. So maybe you are thinking about moving a little bit, if that's even a thing that you're thinking as a coach. But that's part of it. They're second in the league in three-point shooting. Very good three-point shooting team. And they have some pretty good low players too. Obviously, Bam. Jimmy Butler's great at the mid-range. So there's plenty of options to space on the floor and get offense moving all around. And they're also first in rebounding in the whole league, which that is huge, whether that's second chance points or not allowing second chance points. That's a big thing, and that's going to get you a lot of wins just by out-rebounding the other team consistently. Next up, I got the Bucks. Obviously, you have to say they're contender. They were just defending champs. You got Giannis, who's another MVP candidate. Honestly, currently my favorite MVP candidate, probably Giannis, but I don't think he wins it because like voting fatigue and all that stuff. But Giannis, definitely MVP candidate or Defensive Player of the Year candidate, either or. I think he wins one of them. I don't really think he wins both of them. They also have great defense outside of him. Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton, both lockdown defenders. And I think if you see the Bucks go against someone like the Nets, sad to say it for me, the Bulls, nice voice crack, but just like anything like that, they just match up very well defensively. Chris Middleton's locking down pretty much everyone. Giannis, obviously we all know who Giannis is, and Drew Holiday, just a top-tier point guard defender. So the defense on that team is very, very, very good. And I think Giannis by himself makes that team a contender, and they just have a lot of pieces around him that work very well. Next up, I got the Nets, and even with them in the play-in, the fact that Kyrie can now play home games is going to be a huge thing because he missed half of the season because of that. So, and I think, if I'm being honest, I think Kyrie and Kevin Durant are the best duo in the league when they're playing together, if I'm being honest. And that goes with Harden and Embiid, that goes with DeMar and Zach, that goes with like everyone that you could compare it to. I think they're the best duo in the league. I do. And I mean, Kyrie goes out and scores 50. Was it back-to-back games? He had like 105 points in 48 hours or something like that, 72 hours. So they have a lot of scoring. And Kevin Durant, we obviously saw what he did last year in the playoffs. Too bad his feet weren't so big that he was on the three-point line, but that's a different story there. But the team has so much scoring. If Kyrie's playing all, that's going to be a big contributor. They're in the play, and like I said, the only thing with the Nets is their defensive struggles. Kyrie, not a great defender. Kevin Durant, not a great defender. They don't really have a center at this point. They got like LaMarcus Aldridge and Blake Griffin. So their defense might need some help. I think if they do get knocked out, it's going to be because that defense more than their offense. Their offense is going to score. It's just whether they can stop the other team from scoring. Last up for true contenders, I have the 76ers. I feel like you can't leave them out with Embiid being the third MVP candidate, with Joker and Giannis, obviously. I think you have to put him there, especially with Harden coming in. Harden adds a big shooting capability, takes some pressure off Embiid from having to force everything. Embiid doesn't have to always have the ball in his hand. He can let Harden use it. And I think Embiid is running for MVP. I'm not going to put him in order. I do have Giannis at 1 at this moment. But I think every other day Embiid and Joker are like flipping for me. There's just the competition is so good. But I think Embiid dominates every center that you put him up against. And that's going to be a big thing in the playoffs. No matter who you put him up against. And Joker, who the other MVP candidate is in the West. So he's not even facing him. And I think any other person that you put him up against, Joel Embiid one-on-one with another center, or, I mean, I guess Giannis. Giannis might compare pretty well to him, but everyone else, Embiid is just blowing up. He's pushing him down the block. He's going and making plays, and that's going to be a big thing. If Harden can get going, getting his shots rolling, things like that, getting the calls, Embiid's going to be able to just power anyone down, and great defender. You obviously know that, but like, you can't forget about it. James Harden, just if he can get his offense going and give full effort all the time, 76ers definitely a good contender. And you can't forget about Tyrese Maxey and Tobias Harris. I feel like those guys are always like flip-flopping games on who wants to go off. I know right after the trade, Maxey was like, hey, I'm the third star right here. But Tobias Harris, I feel like, at least as a Bulls fan, he's always going off when Embiid's not doing so well or whatever. There's multiple times where, like, in the fourth quarter, Tobias Harris just, like, all of a sudden blows up and, like, takes over the game for a couple minutes there, and all of a sudden, if the 76ers were down, it's a tie game, and it's just like, oh, shucks. So you definitely got to list them there. Next up, we're going to move to my, like, long shot, dark horse, honorable mentions, things of that nature. So we're going to go back to the West first. Nuggets. The biggest thing is Nikola Jokic. And I think the only way that they become a true contender or even a dark horse is if Jamal Murray does return. And I know Denver normally is very protective of their star players. And if they don't think that he's ready right away, they're probably going to wait. And maybe they wait too long. But if Jamal Murray returns, then I think they can be a dark horse team. Next up, we got the Timberwolves. Top 15 defense, top 10 offense. They got D'Lo. They got Cat, who's been putting on a show recently. They got great defense in Pat Bev. And they got Ant. And they're just so fun to watch. And they always rally together. And you got to wonder if that's something that, if that goes on in the playoffs and they start rolling as a team, just like the atmosphere, just haircuts on the sidelines and all that stuff. The team's just fun to watch. The interviews are fun to listen to, and you got to assume that the team itself is having as much fun, and maybe that can do something for them in the playoffs. Next up in the East, I have the Celtics. They've been heating up a lot recently. They're 9-1 in the last 10 games, And I think Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown's scoring capability is just off the charts. If you can get them going at the same time, they can beat pretty much every single team. They're pretty comparable to Kevin Durant, Kyrie, when they're both going at the same time. But I think that's a big problem for them, is that they're not going consistently at the same time. I know there's a lot of talks of, hey, you got to trade one of these guys because they don't work. But when they do work, which honestly is like half the time, and that's not great, but it's not as bad as some people act. When they work together, they are fun to watch. They get things done, and they go out and win games consistently. I mean, they're 9-1 in their last 10 games. They've been heating up since the All-Star break, and I don't see any signs of them slowing down. Another thing, too, they got experience in the playoffs, and that is always going to be a big help. And lastly, as a long shot, and you could argue I'm putting this in because I'm a Bulls fan, but I think it's a true case. The Bulls. I do have the Bulls in there. Zach and DeMar have been playing great. The defense, Patrick Williams, Ayo Dosunmu, Alex Caruso, if Lonzo Ball returns. There's really good defense. They had a really nitty-gritty defense early on in the year. I think they were like third. So their defense is very good. Their offense is great with Zach and DeMar when they're both rolling. You got to get Vooch in there a little more. I feel like they don't use him enough. The only big worry is the big man defense. You go against any great center, any great power forward, Giannis, Joel Embiid, anything like that, Vucevic is getting crushed every single time. And that's a big worry for your defense, is if that low block is just constantly getting blown up, because you don't want to pull Zach or DeMar down, because then you're going to have open shooters. And, yeah, that's just never something that you want to see. So now that we've went over who the true contenders are, I know there's about 20 teams that are technically in the playoffs, maybe 16. I have 8 real contenders, 4 from each, and then 4 long shots. I'm gonna say, oh my gosh, this is tough. I'm just gonna say it. Jazz Suns, Western Conference Finals. I think the Suns make it back to the finals. I do. I think the Suns make it back to the finals. They have their revenge tour. I'm not saying that they're going to win, but they have their revenge tour. And they play the Jazz in the Western Conference Finals. I think in the East, it's going to end up being, the Nets. I really want to say the Nets, but I just don't like their defensive capabilities. So I am going to say the Heat and the Bucks, but I'm going to say I think the Heat, and I don't like saying that. I know Jimmy's there, but I think it ends up being Heat Suns. I think we get a little bit of the mixture between the bubble, kind of hard work and all that. I think it's going to be another close one, and I think Chris Paul still does not get his ring. I think the Heat come out on top on that, and that is my final prediction. I think Jimmy Butler obviously would win the MVP in that situation. But those are all my contenders right there, and as of this moment, an unbiased opinion, because I'm a Bulls fan, I think the Heat come out on top. And I know they're second. I know they're on a losing streak right now, but I think they're going to find a way to get it back together. So thank you for tuning into this. If you are interested in any more content, whether that's hockey, football, basketball, there should be a suggested video to one of my sides right here. I think this one, but it might be this side. I normally do a suggested one, so the video that's going to pop up is going to be the one that most fits your criteria. So go ahead and click that. There's a subscription button. Go ahead and click that if you like my content. Maybe check out a couple more videos. Go ahead and come back. I'm covering this stuff pretty constantly, and once playoffs gets rolling, I'm going to be covering most of the teams and playoffs and thoughts like that. Go ahead and leave a comment down below who you think will win the finals, if you think my contenders were good, and if you think the Heat winning is possible, if unlikely. Go and give a like, a dislike, and thank you all for tuning in. I hope I taught you something. I hope I put a smile on your face, and you guys all be safe out there.